All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos DAF Kuf Lamed Tes. We're going to start by learning about various causes of tzaris by the Jewish people, and in the positive, knowing the cause of it, we'll figure out this is mamash hadavar be'itoi, like Ein Yerushalayim or Ein Yisrael Lifta Ela B'Tzedakah. We're going to be learning about the tragedy of having a corrupt judiciary. And then we're going to come back to Hilchas Shabbos. We're going to be learning more about erecting a oil on Shabbos. We're going to be learning about whether one is permitted to dig a grave on Yom Tif. We're going to be learning about whether hops are allowed to be planted in a vineyard or not. When it comes to Kilei Akerem, Yerek, vegetables and or herbs in a vineyard is also. Trees in a vineyard is mutter. So the question will be, is hops considered trees or are they considered yerek? We're going to have a concept that we have every now and then, that when we are speaking to people that are very learned, we could give them heterim in scenarios where in their specific scenario something is permitted, and we're not concerned that they will take that heter and expand it and apply it to an area where that heter does not apply. But when you speak to people that are less learned, the idea of loy plug, that if there's a general question, that the emes sometimes is allowed and sometimes it's not allowed. The Chazal many times says it's not allowed, just to make sure that people don't erroneously apply it where they may not. We're going to also go back to the first topic of Toilin, ways where one is permitted to suspend a strainer on a keli, Shabbos and Yom Tiv. We're going to be learning a little bit more about straining itself, that if something is already drinkable as is, then there is certainly a much lesser of an issue of straining it on Shabbos and on Yom Tiv. Speaking about Shabbos, and we're going to see that by wine, there were really three types of wines. One of them, the worst, is wine that's so filled with lees or with dregs that it's b'chlal not drinkable. That obviously is also to be strained. Then you have on the other side, wine that is very drinkable. There might be some minute impurities, and that is something that lechatchila could be strained or filtered on Shabbos. The way many of us use our water filter on Shabbos, you're filtering because it could be drunken. It's completely drinkable as is. And then there's going to be this in-between scenario where it's drinkable, it's not that pure. The isur will be an isur midrabanan, and therefore perhaps in certain cases doing it with a shiur will be permitted, and something of that sort. We're going to be learning a gavaldik chiddush. We already mentioned this a few daf ago, that if a person wants to dye, they want to color mustard seeds. We're speaking about mustard seeds that were already sifted or strained or separated. You simply want to add the yellow of the egg to it, then you can run the egg through a strainer, even though the strainer is going to be separating the yellow from the white. Since they are both oichel, it's not that you're taking out one part because you want to eat it and you are right now not wanting to eat the other part. That's boiger. No, but it's b'chlal not for food. Not this part nor that part is oichel. So we consider it continuously oichel. You're doing it for dying. That will be permitted, and many, many more details. Let's start. We left off on Daf Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph, all the way on top of the Amid, right after the two dots by the second line. Tanya, Rabbi Yossi ben Elisha Omer. Baruch atah Adino Eloheinu melech enu b'shar kol yom v'leila. Hashgacha Pratis, we're learning this. Tavshin Pei. We are already in the 3 weeks, and indeed Yahavchu Yamim Elu, but it's mamash hadavar be'itoi. Says the Tana Rabbi Yossi ben Elisha, Imre Isam Doir, Shetzoris Rabbi's boys Olav. So what should you do? Say, Ubedoik B'dayana Yisrael. That's where it all begins from. Go check to see the honesty of the Jewish judges of our based in system of the judiciary. Shekol Torani is all misfortunes. Sheba Allah Olam, not only for the Yidden. First it begins with us, and then it spreads to the world. As it says, please listen to this. Rashi Beis Yaakov, the heads of the house of Yaakov, Ukitsine Beis Yisrael, and the officers of Beis Yisrael, Hamesavin Mishpah, that detest justice, they call Hayishara Akeshu, and they twist all that which is straight. They They built Sion with blood. Yerushalayim ba'avlon, Yerushalayim through iniquity. And what was their sins? We're speaking about the corruption in the judicial system, that our heads are judging based on bribes that they are receiving. The Kohanim are here to render judgments, and the Mechir Yoiru, you have to pay them to render upside down. And their prophets, because of Yiksoimu, will only divinate, will only practice their spirituality if they are paid money. And yet, these people that are corrupt, they still rely on God. They are certain that God is not going to punish them. However, you should know that Rishoyim Elu, Rishoyim Aim, not that just because you rely on God, it doesn't make you into a tzaddik. They are confident that God will not punish them, but they're wrong. But because of these three levels of sin, that shoichat yishpoitu, the mechir yoiru, and the v'yel b'kesev yiksoimu, maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleim gimel puraniyos, kenegel gimel averis shaliyanim, the three that we just mentioned. Shenemar, as it says there in Micha, that lochein b'glalchem tzion soda teichadish. That Tzion, one of the names of Yerushalayim, is going to be plowed over like a field. The Yerushalayim iyintia, Yerushalayim will be a heap of ruins. The Harabayis lebamoisiar will be a high place of a forest. Perhaps now that we know what's Tutzach. Bama can also mean some sort of idol worship location, a location that people designate to serve God. Right, this is what's happening now in Harabayis. And who is running it? Vildachayis. It became a bama from people that belong in a yar. And when will the Shechina return? Until both the judges and the police that are royim will stop, will cease to exist. As it says in Yeshaya, that va'ashiva yodai olayich, or yodi olayich, I will turn my hand against you. And va'etzroiv kevor sigoyech, and I will clean your dross with soap. Va'asira kol b'diloyech, and I will remove all of your metal impurities, all your tin. And v'ashiva sheftaycha v'yishayim, and I will restore your judges as they were in the first place. V'yoyatzayech, and your advisors kebatchilam, and therefore amar ulam ein. Now here it's written by me Yerushalayim, but in the Messiah Sashas he corrects it in Yisrael nifta elavet tzedakah. As it says, Tzion b'mishpati pada v'shaveha b'tzedakah. Now this is a pasuk that's extensively expounded upon in Chassidus. First of all, we teach b'mishpat Torah, and there's Tzion, right, that's redeemed through Torah. Its captives are taken out of captivity through tzedakah, which is very important. And as Chassidus explains, there is Tzion, and whether this is referring to a very high level of Yerushalayim and also referring to the highest level of our neshamas, they are never taken in captivity. Taken in captivity means that something is taken away from where it belongs. It's not shaykh to take away the yid's essence. What happens is it stays where it is, but it's unable to do what it's meant to do. It's unable to express itself. And that needs a redemption. And that happens through Torah. Torah empowers the deepest parts of our neshama to shine to the rest of us. Now, the shavera, that's the Yidden, the lower part of the Jew, is taken away into exile. And therefore it has to be redeemed, it has to be taken back, it has to be returned. And that happens dafka through tzedakah. Continuing with this concept that when we get rid of that which is not perfect within us, that brings about a redemption in the whole world. Meaning when the Yehidim are the arrogant people, and Rashi writes 4 or 5 lines from the top of the Amid, the Yidden that are arrogant to express it by going with the langa huad and going with very fancy clothing. So then Batli Amgushle are certain of our enemies that through their arrogance they oppress us. It's when we get rid of our own arrogance, then the arrogance in the world will cease to exist. When the corrupt judges will become nullified, will cease to exist, then Batli Garzifati were judges or police officers, right, that are out there in the world that are very corrupt. So when we get, everything has to begin from within. And the Gemara explains, all based on the pasuk that we just quoted from Yeshaya, as it says, that Hashem says, I will clean your dross with soap. So sigoyach, right, is some sort of impurity. That's when it's written with a samach, but the samach can turn into a sin, right? Shin sin, and sagi means big. So that's it. So that's the Yahiri. Ibatli dayani batli garzifati, as it says that Heshid Hashem mishpotayich, that when Hashem will remove our bad judges, so then Pina oivayich, then our enemies will also turn away from us. One is connected to the other. Amar Rav Miloi, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer ben Rav Shimon. What's the meaning of the pasuk that Shavar Hashem Mati B'Shoyim? Shevet Moishleim, that Hashem has broken the staff of the wicked, the rod of the rulers. So what does that mean? Shavar Hashem Mati B'Shoyim Elo Hadayonim Shenasu Makal Chazineim. So he is already becoming more subtle. Lest you think that everything we learned about is when you have corrupt judges. Of course, that's the end of the world. But here we're going to go into a more refined type of corruption. So what we're speaking here is about that you have a dayan, and the dayan who renders the judgments needs to have a chazan. The chazan means you're a meshamish. He needs to have a court or official that's going to execute the judgment. Now, what happens if they say to the judges, we will only do what you're telling us to do. If you raise our salary, they make a strike. So if the dayanim give in to them, so they have too much power. So instead of them being in service of the dayanim, so explains Rashi, the dayanim, so to say, become subordinate to them. So if we give in to certain unjust demands because they're striking, because they're protesting, that's the beginning of corruption. This is called mob rule. That's the corruption. Now, did the judges initiate it? No, but they need to have the koyach to put an end to it. Shevet Moishlim, what does that refer to? So what happens if a judge is appointed but he's not qualified? And he gives rulings, and we know the rulings are wrong. So instead of pointing out how he is not qualified and removing him, his family members, they cover up, they protect him, they defend his ruling, or they teach him how to rule with his ignorance in a way that it won't be that apparent that he's making mistakes. In other words, we're not speaking about plain grubber corruption, but we're speaking about people that are able to stop something from going in the wrong direction. And they don't do that. They don't do it because it's their family. They don't do it because it's uncomfortable to do it. This is the type of corruption that has to be uprooted for the Shekhinah to return amongst the Jewish people. Mazutra Amar, Elu Tamir Chachamim, Shemelamdim Halachis, or Hilchis Tzibur L'Dayanei Bor, teaching halachis to judges that are ignorant. Don't teach them, remove them. Now, of course, if this Dayan Bur is going to sit and learn, everyone is able to acquire the Keser Torah. But there are people that are appointed in positions, and this we know, not because they're the most qualified, but because they have the best connections, because it was somehow advantageous for those around them, for them to be the appointed ones. Don't do that, and don't support them in any way, shape, or form. Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Miloi in the name of Reish Lakish. What's the meaning of the pasuk? Also in Yeshaya, Ki kapechem ni goy alu badam, that your hands are soiled in blood, and your fingers are also dirtied with sin. Your lips speak falsehood, your tongues right, they mutter wickedness. Taiches, this Tana, no, the Samaida, Rabbi Eliezer ben Miloi. What's the meaning? That refers Elo Hadayanim, and they make a wrong judgment. You take an innocent person and you kill him. So what sin is done by fingers? Elo Soifrei Hadayanim. The court scribes, they're writing down this wrong psak din. Whose lips speak falsehood? We apologize to all you lawyers out there. Lawyers, and then when it says at the end that that your tongues mutter wickedness, that already refers to the Bali Dinim says Rashi, that the lawyers teach the Baladinim how to lie. And Bachlal, we spoke about this in other times when we learned Sanhedrin, that we certainly are not for the whole concept, the whole institution of lawyers, right? We have Mishnahs and Pirkei Avos that speak to that. We're not going into halacha lamaisa today, you have tayanim, but most people that ever went to trial will tell you that if both parties are honest, they don't need lawyers. They don't need lawyers. You go to court, each one presents the best narrative of how they understand their scenario, and the judges here get the closest to the truth by listening to both sides. The moment you get a lawyer involved, we all know that the lawyer teaches their clients how to lie. And think about it, this became the system today. And that's a terrible thing. In other words, all this is corruption doesn't mean, don't think corruption means guard pashid, that someone knows that the halacha should be A, and you gave him money and he paskin B. Of course, that's corruption. And of course, that happens, which is the biggest tragedy. But there's more subtle types of corruption. Certain systems, like we just mentioned, the system that the whole court system is based on getting a lawyer. And then many times it turns out that the one with the better lawyer, or the lawyer that has less shame and teaches their clients to lie more, they win. And that's gefährlich. Says the Gemara weiter. Omar Rabbi Miloi Mishum Rabbi Yitzchak Migdala. All right? Niyoim. From the day Shepedesh Yosef Me'echov. From the day that Yosef was separated from his brethren. Loitam Tamiyayin. Yosef did not taste wine. As it says, this is words that we have in Vayechi, literal meaning and upon the head of the one that was exiled from his brothers. But also Nazir made the Chechet Nazir. And one of the name of a Nazir is that he shouldn't drink wine. So that's the name is that Yosef HaTzadik abstained from wine. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina Amar. Even the brothers, they also did not taste wine, as it says in Miketz, that when they did finally gather and have a meal before they knew that he's Yosef, so it says Vayishtu, Vayishkuru Imoy. So Michlal, the Adru Idno lo have a shichrus. Now what's that ayah? Just because it says that they sat and they drank and they got drunk. So the word is that people who habitually drink, you become accustomed to it. You don't get shikir when you make a little l'chaim. The fact that it says that they drank and they became drunk, that is already an emes that they haven't drunk for all these 20 years plus. So a little bit of wine made them shikir. Ve'idach, right? Rabbi Elyahu, who holds that only Yosef abstained from wine. So he says, shikru sudulei. What was unique in Miketz is that they never drank the amount to get them drunk, but they did drink before. Elama shikru sudulei hava, but shesiya miyahava. That mischad. When it says in Shemais that when Aaron saw Moshe Rabbeinu, his younger brother, being appointed to the position of our savior, that his heart was filled with joy. So Zajac mishpat, that was put al liboy. You know, it's the opposite of corruption is a person who has such tremendous ethics, like Aaron HaKohen, that he had no envy in his heart. It was the most difficult midos to refine, and Taki, he was Zajac that the Choshen Mishpat went on his heart. So the opposite isn't only to uproot corruption, but it's important on judges and people who have the power to make communal decisions to really work on their midos, not only not to be corrupt and not to be a ganef, but they should become very, very refined. Okay, coming back to Hilchos Shabbos. So we learned in the last year about a canopy, which was very common then, right? Someone mentioned, what about an umbrella? We spoke about the tshuva of the Noidi Yehuda. But a canopy, as we decided, is that if it's prior to Shabbos tied on to the bedposts, so it's already connected, but it's not opened, and what you are really doing only is opening it up. In other words, you are being moisif to an oil arai. We learned that's mutter. But if it's bechlal not connected to the posts, then we learned that opening up such a kila on Shabbos and on Yom Tiv is going to be awesome. Says the Gemara, Shor Chulei b'nei Bashkar. Bashkar is the name of a place. The people asked, or they sent to Levi, the following three questions. Question number one is they wanted to know, kila, mao, can you erect, can you set up a kila? It was common that people had these things on their beds. Can you do it on Shabbos? Question number two, Keshusa bekarma. Keshusa are hops, as we mentioned in our introduction. And as Rashi here points out, a tree in a vineyard is mutter to be planted. Guys, bashkar is chutz la'aretz. This detail will be important. Yerek, whether it's a vegetable and also herbs, is also to be planted in a kedem. They wanted to know, what is teshusa? Is it a tree or is it a yerek? And the third question was meis b'yamtiv mahu. Meis means if someone passes away on yamtiv, is one allowed to dig the grave for this meis? These are the three questions. And what happened was that Ada Azul, by the time the shliach came to Levi, nach nafshe, the Levi passed away. So Amar Shmuel Rab Menashia, Ichakimat, if you have Chachma, they all had Bina. Ezel Chacham Haroyas Hanoilad. Mamash, as we'll see in a moment. If not only we were all learning, but Shmuel felt that Rab Menashia has the Chachma. If you Taka have the Chachma, then you should respond to them. And as we'll see, all of his responses were based on one nekuda, that he had the foresight, knowing who asked the question, that Bnei Bashkar were not the most learned of a community. Even though there are certain scenarios in all of these questions, sometimes yes, sometimes not, instead of him responding, in this case yeah, in this case not, he told them it's always us, because he understood that if people who are not learned are going to get the heter, even if they'll be told the heter is only in this case and not in that case, sometimes they're going to apply it too broadly, and it's just and it's correct, like plug, to tell them also. And they would go to every case. So Shalach he responded, Kila, when it comes to the issue of a kila, of a canopy, Chazarnu al kol tzidei kila, Rav Anashi says, I looked through all of the halachas of kila, v'loy motzinu lo tzad heter. Can't do it. I found no tzad heter. So right away the Gemara is asking, 1 second, we learned that in the last year, or 2 DAF ago. Rami Bar Yecheskel says, depends if it was tied prior to Shabbos. All you're doing is you're being moisef to the oil, it's mutter. So he answered, that's the chachma. Oh, very good. Like Rashi says, 8 lines before the bottom of the Amid, next case, can you plant hops in a kedem? So he responded, no, it is a mixture. It is a problem. So that's not so pasha. That's really a machlikas tanoim. The Tanya, we're quoting here at Tosefta in Kalayim, Kishus, Rab Tarfon says, ain't Kalayim bekedem, because he considers it a tree. Today with Google, you can Google it. You'll mamash see why there's a doubt whether it's called a tree or whether it's called an herb. The Chachamim are the ones that say Kalayim bekedem. And hold on, guys, Bnei Bashkar, they were chutz la'aretz, and as was Levi, as was Shmuel. And V'kaimelon, this is the rule, that kol hamekel ba'aretz, halacha k'moisei b'chutz la'aretz. I know that Rab Tarfon is a yachid, but the rules are that taka b'chutz la'aretz, you should be allowed to plant hops in a vineyard. So here again, that was the var. And their fear was that someone from Bashkar is going to make Aliyah. He's going to come with the knowledge, we were given a heter that we can plant this type of hops in the vineyard, and he might do it in Eretz Yisrael, and that's going to be an issue. Machris, Rav Chaim, now coming to this topic itself, I'm sorry, Machris Rav announced, Haiman the boy Mizra, whoever wants to plant the hops, Kshusa Bekarma, Mizra, no problem. And indeed, where was Rav? In Surah, in Chutz La'aretz. Rav Amram Chasida, Mangidilove, he was very machon. He gave Malchus for someone who were to do it. And Rav Mesharshia, he felt that really the Chutz La'aretz it's mutter. Ba'aretz is the problem. He also knew that if sometimes you can't tell people it's okay, they might bring it to Eretz Yisrael. So his way out was not to say it's asur, but what he did was, Yoiv le'pruta letinuk nachi, he would tell Yidden, you pay a non-Jewish minor, pay him money, and he'll plant it for you. Well, and that will be the way for people to remember it's not so pashut. If it's not so pashut in Eretz Yisrael, they're going to ask again, and they're going to be told you're not allowed to do it. Make a shinoi. But why do you have to give it to a goyish kid? 3 lines from the bottom. Answers the Gemara, no. Asal l'misrach. That Tinuk Yisrael, if he gets paid for doing it, when he'll become an adult, he'll plant it. And again, he'll plant it even if he moves to Eretz Yisrael, and that will be the problem. Okay, so give it to a guy. Why does it have to be a minor? So here also, if we will become accustomed to paying a guy to do it, an adult, we might end up paying a yid to do it. You have to make a big shino. You have to give it to a child. That's a guy. Okay. Now the third question was mace, right? Can you bury someone on Yom Tiv? The issue would be, let's begin with digging a grave, right? That's mamash an act of boina or of chaydish, or chadisha, shalach lahu. So he responded, mace, lo yisasku bei lo yehudoyin, lo yarmoyin, not a yid nor a goy is allowed to be misasik in burying the mace, not on the first day of Yom Tiv and not on the second day of Yom Tiv. Across the board is it. And here again, the Gemara is going to ask, not so pashut, it's really not usher across the board. There are certain cases when it's mutter. Like the Gemara Eini, the Amar Rabbi Yehuda Bar Shilas, Amar Abasi, there was a story that happened in the shul when on Yom Tiv that was juxtaposed to Shabbos. Now, that makes a difference. Don't forget the question that they asked in Bashkar was Bechlal on Yom Tiv. And as we'll see, according to the way Rashi learns our Gemara, on Yom Tiv, you may never bury if someone passed away on Yom Tiv. But if Yom Tiv is Samach L'Shabbos, that's already different. Turning to DAF Kuf Lamed Tes on the base. And below Yodana, we don't exactly remember whether that story was Milafanel or Mila Acharel, whether it was Yom Tiv before Shabbos. Listen to the difference. If someone passes away on Yom Tiv out of Shabbos, if you're going to say don't bury on Yom Tiv, you're not delaying it for one day, you're delaying it for 2 days because Shabbos for sure you can bury. So you're going to cause for the body to decompose even more. So there's a greater issue of Kavod HaMeis, and also the people that are living, how they will feel about it. Or if someone passes away on Yom Tov of Shabbos and he did not on Yom Tov begin to decompose, maybe just because he will, maybe that's not enough of a reason to be matir. Maybe the story was that Yom Tov was after Shabbos. Someone passed away on Shabbos. So here on Yom Tov, the body is already decomposing. The body already has a worse odor. That's a bigger reason to be matir. So whichever one it was, but there was a case, and v'asul l'kamei de Rabbi Yechanan, and v'amalahu yisasku beyamanim. He says, even though Yidden cannot do it, but ask a guy to do it. I should have mentioned that on Aleph, right? We learned Amira la'akum is an Isur D'Rabbanan, but it's not an Isur D'Oraisa. And even if we're going to paskin, without the Rebbe paskins, that it's already connected to Shlichus, but still, it's only, there's ain't Shlichus la'akum. It's only Shlichus la'akum l'chumra. It's a rabbinic chumra that on Shabbos we do say Shlichus la'akum. Be that as it may, you have to bring it down from a D'Oraisa Chodesh to a D'Rabbanan. And now the concept of kavod of the mace or the kavod abriyos, that will overweigh, in this case, the Isur D'Rabbanan of Amir la'akum. So why do we see that sometimes it's mutter? Now, the story of Bnei Bashkar, it wasn't that there was a mace that was connected to Shabbos. Doesn't matter. But the question again is, why did he say it's us? He should have told them it depends when. It's all the same concept. Another detail, Ve'amaravam, mace, here Rashi, Shitas Rashi adds mace doesn't mean stam mace. It means mace on Shabbos, and the next day is Yom Tov. So then, the Yom Tov Rishon means he didn't pass away today. He passed away on Shabbos, but he can't bury on Shabbos. Here, he taka paskin disasku bayamanim. Then through a goy you can bury. And the Yom Tov Sheni, if someone passed away on the first day Yom Tov, so then on Yom Tov Sheni is asku by Yisrael, because kfar hisriach l'shitas Rashi. Furthermore, this heter v'afilu b'Yom Tov Sheni shel Rosh Hashanah. Here we allow for a burial to happen on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, unlike the din of a beitza, as we learned, God willing soon in Masechtas Beitza, that if an egg is born on Yom Tov, because of the concept of noiled, it's muksa on Yom Tov. But the Mishnah says, but now that minig aviseinu b'yodenu, that we keep Yom Tov Sheni, the beitza is not muksa on the second day, with one exception. That since Rosh Hashanah, even though we keep 2 days Rosh Hashanah, and the second day is called Yoima Arichta, so if an egg came into the world on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, it's muksa, not only on the first day, even on the second day. So when it comes to the dinim of muksa, we differentiate. Rosh Hashanah is more chamur. When it comes to this heter of burying a mace, according to Rabbi, directly by Yidden, that a Yid can bury on Yom Tov Sheni, that's even on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, we don't say Yoim Ha'arichta. All of this shows that, the way Rashi learns, in all of these cases, If someone passes away on Yom Tov, we may not bury. But if it's 2 days meaning either Shabbos before or Shabbos after, or if someone passed away and now it's Yom Tov Sheni, in these cases we may bury, sometimes through a goy, sometimes directly. So again, why didn't he say that? Why did he say it's Asur? So for the third time, says the Gemara, Lafi she'einon b'nei Torah. And this is a big klal. It's a big klal of being cautious. Chachamim hizoharu b'dvareichem. Many people, they hear a heter and they expand it. And only learned people know not to do that. And if a person is not b'nei Torah, doesn't only mean knowledgeable with information. B'nei Torah, we will call it Yirah Shamayim. If people are God-fearing, they'll be cautious. Not for this case did we ask the Shaila. Okay, weiter. Amar Avavin bar Rafuna, Amar Avcham bar Guria. Misatef Adam Bekila, Ubekas Keseh, Yoisel Rishus Rabim B'Shabbos, Veino Choishesh. If you have a kilo, we're not speaking about spreading the kilo on your bed. Yes, we're speaking about a way to carry the kilo from one domain to another. So one solution will be wear it as a garment. Oh, so if I'm wearing the kilo as my outer cloak, what's the issue? Then it became my garment. The issue will be that you did have strings attached to the corners of this kilo. These are the strings that used to be tied around the bedposts. Those strings are not necessary if you're using the kila as a garment. So will we say that you're violating chaytzah? So he said that no problem, you could wear it. We don't consider the string significant, and therefore you're not carrying anything. The person has a talus, and one of the fringes, one of the sides got pulled off. So there's only 3 tzitziyos. So we know that that's not valid. Now, aside of the issue of putting on that garment here, you're violating a positive commandment because you're wearing a beged that has galot kanfos and it's not properly fringed. Aside of that mitzvah, say, he paskin that you chayv chatas for carrying. Upa, how are you carrying? You're not carrying the beged, but you're carrying the 3 fringes. So since they don't fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis, so it's not only that they're not allowing you to do the mitzvah. No, now they're superfluous. They're not needed. It's not a mitzvah. If it's not a mitzvah, now it's considered a maswa you're carrying. So just like the tzitziyos are not needed if it's only 3 and not 4, or only 2 and not 4, or any way that it's not kil chasa, so why don't we say the same thing with the strings attached to the kila? Answers the Gemara Gevaldik. Tzitzis ligabatalis chashive. Tzitzis is chashav for the talus, even if it's not yet kil chasa. If you're going to want to fix your talus cotton or talus gadol, what do you need to do? You only need to attach the 4th corner. That means you will rely on that which is there. You value it. So therefore, since it has value, it's not batul. And since it's not fulfilling the mitzvah, it's called carrying midoiraisa yechayv chatos. But these strings that are on the edges of the kila, since loy chashivi, it's not significant. Even though you might end up using it later to put it around your, it's not a mitzvah strings. The less chashuv something is, the more it's batul, Gavaldi. So therefore, indeed, it's batul, halachically, and therefore it's not considered carrying. Omar Abba Barafuna, or according to the Bach, Omar Reb Ovin, Ma'arim Adam al HaMishameres B'Yamtev, Liklis B'Yamainen. So we're going back to the first Mishnah in the Spadek, right? We're speaking about covering a keli with this strainer, and even though on Yom Tiv, even let Rabbanan, right, that they restrict how much can you break the Yom Tiv, it has to be directly related to preparing food, but putting wine through a strainer on Yom Tiv, l'kula almas mutter, this is mamish oichel nefesh. But nevertheless, the Chachamim did not allow you to put it on top of the keli. And when we learned to sugya, we began with the concept of an oil aray, and that was taken out. And what did we conclude? That the issue was uvda the choil. So here there's a way of employing a ha'arama and allowing you to put on the strainer. And don't forget that l'chachamim, once you put on the strainer, you can use it. What will be the ha'arama? You are not putting on this cloth in order for you to strain wine through it directly into the cup. No, you're putting on it because you want to have something in which to put rimayim. Now, why do you want to put the rimayim in the cup itself? You don't want to. So as long as you're putting it in order, litlois doesn't mean to hang. It means to put in that cover, to put on this cover, remind him, then you are allowed to do that. And once you already affix this cover on the keli, now and now we can use it as a strainer, like we mentioned, that the chachamim hold that on Yom Tov you are allowed to do it. In other words, this is a way of circumventing uvda the chayil. Amar Rav Ashi v'hu. You know when this is a good heter? Only the Tala Baramayim, only if de facto, before you strain the wine through this Mishameres, you actually put for a moment somebody minim to make it clear to all that the reason why you put it was in order to hold Rimayim. Why do you have to do that before you use the strainer? Matilde, Sheikhar, B'mayed, L'tzoyrech HaMayed. Can you make beer on Chalamayit? So it says like this: beer that you want to consume on Chalamayit, you can do. But if, by the way, Tzedach HaMayit doesn't only mean for Chalamayit, it can also mean for Yom Tov. Because during Chalamayit, I can make beer if I'm going to drink it on Chalamayit or on Yom Tov. What about Shaloi Tzedach HaMayit? I have enough beer for Chalamayit. I have enough beer for the last days. To make more, theoretically, is Asad. However, says the Tanach, and that goes for Echad Sheikhar Tamarim, whether it's a date beer, over Echad Sheikhar So'idim. However, even if Taka, the fact is you have enough beer, that's the meaning of old, you have what you need. Nevertheless, if you make beer on Chalamayit, as long as later, at some point, you will drink from it, right? So what's the pshat? So then you can argue that you were not planning to use your yashan on Yom Tov, so you needed more for Yom Tov, so now you can make new beer. So what do we see from over there? That even though the only way we allow that ha'arama is by drinking from it, but when do you drink from it? After you make it. After you make it. So here also, if you put the strainer, you do it to be MERCAVA, remind him, Rav Ashi should say, you can strain right away, but at some point, put Rimayim on it. As long as at any point later you use it for Rimayim, that should be Megala retroactively, that taka you put it also for Rimayim. But Rav Ashi says no. Rav Ashi says you cannot even use the strainer before you put Rimayim in it. Why? You see that this harama doesn't force you to drink it. Forget, you're making beer. When you're making beer, you have beer. No, you're not planning to use it. You're planning to use the new ones. As long as you use it later, it's good enough. As long as you use the strainer to hold Rimayim should be good enough, not necessarily dafka before asks the Gemara. So the Gemara responds, no, Hassan over there by the beer, loy muchach milsa. When someone sees you making beer, they don't know whether you have beer or not. They don't know that. And even though you know you have enough beer, you are allowed to make a harama by saying, I don't want to use that. I want to use this. And you can do it. You have to drink from it. But over here, putting this type of cloth on top of a keli is generally only used for straining. And we established that uvda d'chol, you're not allowed to do it. So since it's a muchach hamilsa in the negative, it looks bad. So you have to show everyone you're taka using it for another purpose. You're not using it to strain. And only after you did that, now that it was there, beheted, can you use it to strain wine on Yom Tov. Take a look at this young Torah scholar and Rav Huna bar Chavon Shemei, or Rav Huna bar Chalvon is his name. And he knew how to employ these haramas. So here's one case. The shakal bara the taima, he took a clove of garlic, umanach bebarza the dana, and he put it in the spigot of a barrel. In other words, the barrel had a spigot, and obviously wine was leaking out. Fixing the spigot is called, according to Rashi, not binyan ein binyan bekele, but it's called MERCAVA patish. However, fixing it in a non-perfect way is certainly not asan midoraisa, but it might be asan midrabana, as a rabbinic tikkun mana. But what he did was, when he put this garlic in the hole, and he says, I'm not putting it to fix it. He said, I'm putting it because I don't have where else to put the garlic. In other words, this type of a ha'arama was allowed to get away from a Isur D'Rabbanan. Another leniency, another ha'arama that he employed was that v'azul v'noyim b'mavra, that on Shabbos he went to sleep in a sailboat. Now a guy setting sail on Shabbos and on Yom Tov is asur midrabanan. And he went into the boat, but he didn't go to set sail. He went there to sleep. What happened was he knew what's going to happen, that the boat is going to be ferrying from one place to the other. And the reason why this young Torah scholar wanted to be brought to the other side of the river was because he had some property and he had things planted there and he wanted to check it out. The soil paid him and he checked out his produce. And you're not allowed to set sail on Shabbos lechatchila, but he said, I didn't go to set sail. I went to rest here. In other words, they were trying to criticize him that he's using haramas. Says the Gemara, harama kamrat. That's not a problem. Harama is only a harama when it's only an isur midrabanani, and if it's sort of a midrabanan, the opposite of Amud Aleph. When you don't have b'nei Torah, you have to be extra machmer. When people are called a tzurba midrabanan, it's not just knowing the knowledge, but a God-fearing person. If you know the halachas and you're God-fearing and you're not going to violate the isur midrabanan, so then, yes, then if there is a way to circumvent your way out of the drabanan, then you are allowed to do it. Moving on with the next mission. More about straining. And as the Rishonim explain, that here we have three qualities of wine. You have wine that it has so much shematim, whether the word in English is lees or dregs. We'll use the word shematim. There's so much of them, we mentioned this a few DAF ago, more than the wine. This wine cannot be consumed without sifting it out. That's an isur d'oraisa. Then we'll call this quality C. Then you have quality A. The wine is great, mamash great. There might be some imperfection, some impurity, some little cloud on the top. That is allowed to be put through a strainer on Shabbos. Important. That will be the chiddush of our sugi over here. That's if something is mamish, potable, I think in English, drinkable right now, no problem to filter it out on Shabbos. Are you making it even more perfect? It's not a problem. The Mishnah is speaking about what we're going to call quality B. It's not that you can't drink without sifting it out, but there is already a certain higher level of shematim in there, and that will be a problem with the Rabbanim. So let's read the Mishnah. Case number one. And whenever there's something that's also midrabanan, then employing any shinoi makes it mutter. Just like if something that's also midoraisa. If you do a shaloi kedarkoi, we're learning this continuously on Shabbos, a shaloi kedarkoi or a shinoi brings it down a notch from a doraisa to a drabanan. If something to begin with is only a midrabanan, when you make a shinoi, it becomes a mutter. Now, says the Mishnah, noisnin mayim al gaba hashamarim b'shul sheyitzoylu. You, prior to Shabbos, you already filtered out your wine. And now you have, on top of the strainer, you have dregs, you have lees, you have shematim. The shematim obviously still have some juice in it. They still have some wine in it. Think about it. Am I allowed to pour water over the shematim on Shabbos? What will be the issue? The issue will be that after the water goes into the shematim, now this water gets mixed with the shematim and the wine. And then when it goes through the sifter on the other end, now the shematim stay on the top. And now you have wine, right, temed, that has a little bit of wine taste or wine color in it. What will be the problem? Listen, you're not starting out with water that's not drinkable. The water is pure. But you would argue, once you throw the water on top of the sifter and it touches and it gets mixed into the shematim, now when it goes through the filter, now it's getting filtered out. Says the Mishnah, that's b'chlal not a problem. B'chlal not a problem. You're starting out with something that's completely drinkable, water. Now you want to take some of the juice in the shematim and have it in the water, no problem. You're not doing an act of sifting. You can lechatchila do it. Din number two, that was the Hagdama that we gave, the wine and quality B, which there it's drinkable, but there are already a higher level of impurities, and therefore midrabanan you can't sift it, but making a shinoi makes it completely mutter. And what will be the shinoi? Have it go either through sudarim. A sudar was their turbans. It's a cloth. have it go sifted through a turban or through a kafifa mitzvah, some sort of basket, some palm twig basket, being that people normally don't sift wine through these types of sifters, and the Isra is only midrabanan, it becomes mutar lechatchila. Another chiddush of the Mishnah, the noisnim beitza b'misanena shel chalvel, period. That if you making sifting mustard seeds on Shabbos is also midoraisa. But if you already did it, so again you have the sifter underneath it from before Shabbos, you already have the high quality mustard seeds, and here you want to add color to it. So you're putting an egg, a raw egg, on top of the sifter, and the nature will be that the white will remain above and the yellow will go through it. And l'chayda, that's an act of boirer, right? You're separating the yellow from the white. So the Mishnah is machadesh, you can do a lechatchila. As the Gemara will explain, God willing, we'll get to. We already spoke it in the intro that why it's permitted. Next din in the Mishnah, more of this will be on Kuf Mem. V'oisin inoimlin b'Shabbos. Inoimlin is some sort of beverage. Now, whether this is a beverage, that the issue here is that since some people make it and drink it l'refuah, so it goes into the prohibition of making remedies on Shabbos. Or whether inoimlim is a beverage that takes a lot of work, or relative a lot of work to make it, so it's an issue of tircha yisera. We'll learn more what the issue is. Nevertheless, the Mishnah allows you to do it. However, Rabbi Yehuda puts restrictions. He says, no, there's a question of certain things are allowed in a small quantity. On Shabbos, you can only make 1 cup. And this has to do clearly with tircha. On Yom Tov, a little bit more. Bilagin. And b'mayid, chalamayid, b'chavis. Rav Tzadok is somewhere in between the Tanakama that's mated, no limits. But he's more lenient than the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, and he says that you can't give me across the board on Shabbos 1 cup, on Yom Tov one jug. No, hakoy lefi ha'orchim, and if indeed you have orchim, then even on Shabbos you can make a larger amount. Okay, so we're going to leave the inoimlim for Kuf Mem, and now we're focusing on the beginning of the Mishnah. Every din in the Mishnah was a gavaldik chiddush. Amar Zeidi says the Gemara, Noisnin Adam Yayin Solul. Based on the first line of the Mishnah, that you can add wine through Shemarim. And why is that? Because that was the Nakuda. Since the water is drinkable as is, even though you're filtering it, doesn't matter. So if you have clear wine or you have clear water, you can have it go through the Mishnah. Guys, we paskin like this. In my kitchen, there is this little thing. Everything goes through water, goes through a filter. We drink it because it's good even without it. It's making it better, not a problem. But if wine is murky, and let's say that this goes to the second case in the Mishnah, wine quality B, it's drinkable, but not that great. Here, in Loi, meaning it's also midrabanan. It says in a Braisa, a person is allowed to steer a barrel that has in it wine. What does steering it mean? What are you mixing? He says, the Gemara explaining it, that you are mixing the wine and the shvarim together. You can stir it up, and the noise then, which means that if it's quality B, you can strain it. You don't have to put it through a sudan or through a basket. So answers the Gemara, that Braisa is bein hagitoy shanu. Mamash amazing. It depends where. What does where mean? That in the wine press, I don't know the minig now, but when you go, I know today when you go to the Herzog, when you go to Oxnard, so they have over there as a drinking bar to taste wines. If for some reason, when you buy wine in the wine press, people are accustomed to drinking wine, quality B. They're fine with that. So it doesn't bother them that you have a certain amount of dregs or of lees. So whenever it's accustomed, whenever people drink it as is, then there's no problem sifting it even through a normal sifter. But if you're not in the Gitais, there people want to have a better quality. You want quality A. If it's quality B, it's asan midrabanan. That's the chiddush, and therefore making one shinoi is going to be completely is going to bring it down a notch. It's midrabanan to mutar lechatchila, and that's the next case that mesanan and esayan besudarin. However, you should not allow to make a guma, a stomach inside the sudar, either because if you're going to do that, then you're making, when you have a sifter, think about the sifters. I don't know, in Brazil, everyone has sifters because nothing there is pure. The flour has to be sifted, the rice has to be sifted, the beans have to be sifted. So a sifter has like a stomach. It has a receptacle. It's not flat. If you're going to make the sudar into the look of a sifter, then either it's called uvda d'choil, or it's too similar to a sifter. It has to be an apparent shinoi in order for it to be mutar lachatchila. Another option the Mishnah gave was that you can sift this quality B wine through a kefifa mitzris, Amar Rabbi Barashi, in the name of Rav, ubovad shelo yagbia mekarkiyosei shel keli tefach upa. Hoy gewalt. He says that, yeah? He says, if you're putting this kefifa mitzris and you're pouring the wine in the keli, the kefifa mitzvahs has to be within a tefach of the bottom of the keli. Because if it's a tefach above it, then you're making an oil aray on Shabbos. Oy gewalt. Now, Chevra, let me just say one thing. There's no problem putting a cover on top of a pot. No one subscribes to that. You're making an oil aray. A cover of a pot was meant for the pot. It's part of the pot. Right? You take off the soup, you put on the cover, and obviously not when it's on the fire. But here, since you're putting something foreign on the skeli, that's why it's called a shinoi, which makes it mutar. So here Rav is saying, if you're putting something that does not belong on a keli, and you're going to leave it there, even though only for Shabbos, only during the time that you're going to sift it on Shabbos, yes, it does touch upon an issue of an oil aray, and the solution will be have a very wide keli. The basket has to be so narrow that it can go inside the keli. So it's right near the bottom of the keli. Pour the wine on top of it, and as long as you don't have a tefach space between the kefifa mitzvahs and the bottom of the pot, then there's no issue even of an oil aray. Wow, that's a big chumrah. Amarav, hi pravanka. Pravanka is some sort of rag that people would use to cover barrels. Again, it's not the barrel cover. It's not the barrel cover. Again, Rav L'Shita said that if you cover a keli with something that was not designated to be that keli's cover, you could go into the issue of oil aray. So if you're covering with tashmata, so he says, Al palge the kubashari. Don't cover the whole top. And then it's not even an issue of an oil aray. It's not even called an aray. But akule, but if you're going to use the shmat and cover the entire pot, that's going to be also, again, l'shitasai oil aray. And Amar Rav Papa going now to strain, to separate. He says, don't forget that Rav Papa was very wealthy, and amongst other things, he made beer. That when you had the inish siniyosam, made the koizne, the chavisam, they used to have barrels of wine or of beer, and near the barrel, they would have some sort of jug, so they would pour the wine out of the barrel into the jug. So some people thought that they're going to put in the mouth of the jug, when the wine goes into it, they're going to pack it up with chips of wood, and that will serve as a filter. It wouldn't take out the little shemarim lech, it wasn't the real sieve, but the larger impurities that might have been in the barrel will get stopped if you would pack it up with this type of wood chips. So says Rav Papa that don't do that. That don't pack up the opening of this jug with these wood chips. It's mechzek and neshamot because it did not do a perfect job in sifting out all of the lees. Yes, it was put in there because it would sift out the larger imperfections if there was a little pebble or rock or dirt. Nevertheless, it looks like you're sifting, and therefore don't pack it in. If you don't pack it in, this was the minhagim of those times, then it's not a problem. The Veda Papa in the household of Rav Papa, shafu shichra mimana lomana, they would pour beer from one cup to the other. Watch shot, they would pour beer. Now that we see he was machmir, not packing up the opening with this wood chips, what happens if they would have beer that would have some impurities in it? You can't sift it. They will push this thing in beer. The impurities sink to the bottom. So what they would do is they would pour out the beer from one cup. They would pour it into another cup. Now in the beginning, there's not a problem. Where might there be a problem? When you come mamish to the end, when you look inside the cup of the giver, of the mashpia, and you see over there some dirt, some pebbles, and some beer. At the end, if you're careful by making sure that the pebbles and the dirt stays in cup aleph, and only the beer goes to the makabel, to cup B, That's already an issue of perhaps separating, right? Even though it's oichel from the psoilas, but that's already an issue. But they had no problem with it. They would pour beer from one cup to the other. But at the end, in the last droplets, you're doing an act of separating. That's the whole reason why they poured the beer from one cup to the other. So the Gemara says that since they were very wealthy, they did not squeeze out the cup A until the last drop. So they would pour it out until they came almost to the end. There, Bachlal, there was no dirt. The dirt was all the way in the bottom. When they would come mamish to the bottom, they would know not to go all the way to the end. That already enters the concept of sifting. And let's hop on one more line. Now, when it comes in the Mishnah that nois and beyam or beitza b'misanenes, that we can have an egg go through some sort of sifter into pre-sifted mustard. Tana Yaakov Karcha Daf Kuf Mem. The kasha is, how can you do that? Your mamish separating. The yellow goes through, the white stays on the top. You don't want the white, you only want the yellow, right? That's oichel. That's a problem. Now, yeah, we learned on Daf Ayin Dalid or Ayin Hey that oichel metechaf soilas is okay. We learned other conditions. One of them is you have to eat it immediately, and this is not daf if it's being consumed immediately. So the answer is that's the big chiddush here. When do we say that if you have food and you're separating one part from the other, and the part that you're not eating now, we will call psoilus, and now you got a problem with sifting. That's only if you will eat the other part. As long as you're eating neither parts. Here you're not eating the yellow, you're not eating the white. We consider both parts oichel. That's not both parts psoilus. Look inside the top of Rashi. For color. The yellow is good for the gavon. Not the white. Hilkov says Rashi, idi oichelu. Amazing. And therefore, you're not being bited the psoilus from the oichel. It's even more because the white is staying on the top. You're not doing bited at all. Oichel is completely permissible. Moededik. And therefore, lachatchila, you can sift through the yellow, God willing, to be continued. I'll have a quick coffee. I'll be back in a minute. It's like a lot of miscellaneous, like the Shmira Shabbos Kilchas and Masechta Shabbos are these few dafim. And the same thing will be in Kufman. We're going to learn a whole series of 1,000 different scenarios.
Miscellaneous, not miscellaneous.
Who said that? Miscellaneous. Good. Not miscellaneous. I stand corrected. Kufman.
Exactly. Rabbi.
Yes.
Can you explain something here? You're saying that because the yolk is not being eaten and the white is not being eaten, therefore it's not bitter?
Amazing. White, we're learning the we're running. It's amazing. Bitter means oichel, means psoilus matoich oichel. The Rashi says, what's the psoilus here? You're going to say the white because you don't need the white. He says you don't need the yellow to eat either. So,
but you're using it for coloring, so you obviously want it.
Since the white is good, no, it's objectively it's good. What makes something psoilus? Because you don't want it. Says the Gemara, you don't want the yellow. You don't want the yellow for consumption. Think about it. We're just going too quick. It's a gavaldik chiddush this. But once you hear it, then yeah, you get it.
Morning, Samach. You look good.
Good morning. Good luck. Thank you.
Where are you?
New York.
Oh, look at that.
Don't think Tanach is multitasking with one phone call. There are 8 phones over there. That's what's happening. And a Bishul Gemara in the Zain solution on a Sunday morning in the Catskills. That's what's happening over here.
I'm doing my best, Rabbi. Sorry.
It's inspiring. It's good. Properly. All right, Freilach, let's go. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Kuf Mem. We are in the middle of Dafim that are going through many miscellaneous Hilchos Shabbos. We're going to be focusing now on the issue of kneading of lisha, because we just mentioned making mustard, and we already mentioned before the issue of making mustard from the outset. Aside of the sifting part of it, is that any time you take various particles and you make them into one mass, that is the oiraisa, the issue of kneading, of lisha. Now, whenever you do something b'shinoi, we just spoke this out on the last year, you at least bring it down from an isur deraisa to an isur derabanan. Now, my friends, there's something unique about kneading, all right? That if you make 2 shinuyim, it becomes completely mutter. We don't say this by other malachas. One shinui takes it down to a derabanan, and another shinui makes it mutter legamre, and we're going to be speaking a lot about kneading. The definition of kneading midoiraisa isn't only gathering particles into one mass, but it's the way you do it. In other words, there has to be some sort of forceful beating action that brings all of these particles together. Like I just give you a mashal, and again, we're not paskening, just we're learning concepts. That making oatmeal on Shabbos, that the issue of making oatmeal on Shabbos, that's your classical kneading. I'm not even going into the bishul aspect, but here you can use a klesheni, and some people, aside of making it very watery, which lavdafka is really going to help, how do you define that? They're going to subscribe to, number one, again, 2 shinoim. How, if during the week, first you put the oatmeal in the bowl and then the water, so then do it the opposite way around. That's one shinoi. And then the way you'll mix it, that's what they use from our Gemara. Instead of forcefully mixing it, you're going to put your spoon in and you're going to go shesi ve'erev. You'll make an X and an X and an X instead of going in a circular form. That is considered another shinoi. And some people, maybe for children, this is just al yesh lahem amashi yismoichu, to be allowed to do it like that on Shabbos. We're going to be learning about if a person is taking medication. Now, medication, the holy Yisur Rabbanan of taking medication, because you might end up grinding the herbs, shchika samamanim. We learned that if there is some sort of danger involved, if it's more than a mechush, if it's a chayli, even if she'ein by sakana, he's allowed to take medication. Now we're going to be learning about people that they are on the last day of treatment. And maybe the last day of treatment is a day in which you can no longer say that they are a chayli she'ein by sakana. So maybe they should delay it on taking a Shabbos, which is a very interesting topic. We're going to be going to many hilchos derecheretz and daf kuf mem amid beis, not related to Shabbos. We're going to be learning various eitzah tovas that Rav Chisda gave to his daughters, one of which we know married Rava, and then, God willing, we'll start a new sugya on kuf mem amid beis, which is going to be dealing with the issur of muktzah as it relates to that which might be food. Food by default is not muktzah, whether it is food meant for human consumption or food for animal consumption. But at one point, if food becomes inedible, it will become muktzah. And that's going to lead us into various questions. When food was designated for animals, when animals already ate from it, can you move that food to give it to another type of animal? Which animal does eat the sharaim from the ones, and which animals don't eat the sharaim from ones? That will be part of the many topics we'll be learning about on Daf Kuf Mem. We left off on Daf Kuf Mem Amud Aleph, top line, the middle of the line, Itman, continuing with mustard preparation. Mustard was obviously a food that was very much made in those days. And again, the issue here, we began about making mustard. You begin by sifting the seeds. That's the issue of boider. Then you have an issue of lisha. So when we learned that chardel, that was already shalashum out of Shabbos, if it was already needed, the seeds are no longer individualized, but they are already considered halachically one mass. Even though you need to really add more liquid, you are allowed to add more liquid on Shabbos, l'machar. What about tomorrow? Now, what will be the issue? The issue will be is that, listen, you're not violating a do'iraisa meeting because it's already shalosh of Shabbos, but you're adding to it. So that's an isur d'Rabbanan. Making one shinoi, that's what we learned also in the last daf. Take something that's also midrabbanan and it makes it mutter. So Amarav, make it mit shinoi. What was the shinoi for Rav? Memachu bekeli avoloi biyad. Evidently, Rav felt that the steeping mustard seeds by adding water and using your hand is the correct way of doing it. So in order for you to make the shinoi, do it bekeli. Now again, why isn't it rasa midoraisa? Because it was already shalosh of Shabbos. Next, Amalei Shmuel. Shmuel disagrees with Rav. Shmuel tells Rav, biyad. Are you telling me to do it with your hand? Doing it with your hand is the shinoi. Atu kol yoyim mamachle biyad. I'm sorry, Rav says do it with a keli. Rav says do it with a keli. Because biyad is the norm. No. Shmuel says you never use a yad when you make mustard seeds. You know why? Because Michael Chamayrimu, that was Shmuel's expression of only that which is going to be fed to Chamayrim are the items that you use your hands when you make them. If something is being made for people, don't use your hands. Here we have the chef Mayan with us over here. He'll tell you, everything is with cleanliness, with kalim. Maybe today you have gloves, it's different. But menutzish the hand. Now with all of the viruses and the illnesses, hygiene, Elamar Shmuel, the opposite, indeed. That the shinoi is mamachu biyad. Use it with your hands. Don't use a keli because Shmuel in the week would add this, the mixing, the making, the lisha of this chardal. He would normally use a keli. So the shini will be doing it biyad, the opposite of Rav Itmar. What do we paskin like? Rabbi Elazar, the Amoira, says echad zeh echad zeh asur. Chlal does not allow you to do it, even with the shinoi. Rabbi Yochanan began by being very lenient. Omar echad zeh echad zeh mutar. And who is Mekel. And you should know that indeed Rabbi Yochanan himself changed his mind later. He went from saying echad zeh mutar, he went min hakotza lakotza. Come Rabbi Yochanan b'shitasi Rabbi Eliezer that it's always asur. And the come Rabbi Elazar that began by saying it's always asur, and he at the end shows the sheet of Shmuel that doing it with the shinoi is mutter, and his, so to say, bedside manners was to begin with like Shmuel. He did not use his hands during the week, so the shinoi was to do it with your hands. It says the Gemara, halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan. Yeah, Abaye and Rabbi said before, thank you. But when Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind, or when they found out that he changed his mind, they paskin like Rabbi Yochanan. Says the Gemara, he made Abaye. Abaye's mother, again, is not his mother, his stepmother, of the lay. She, again, there was chardal that was already needed from before Shabbos, but it needed some more moisture. And she did it. And she did it with the shinoi. However, he did not consume it. Indeed, as we just learned, that they both paskin like Rabbi Yochanan's new opinion. The Visu de Zeira, the wife of Zeira of the lay, she added this liquid in the chardal that was already pre-lashub from before Shabbos to Rab Chia Barashi, who was one of the Talmidim of her husband, and he didn't eat it. So Amar Loi, so she tells the Talmud, I make it for my husband, but she didn't refer to him as her husband, to your Rebbe. L'rabach avidi, and he eats it va'akli ochlat. This frumer from dein Rebbe. Gewaldig. And by the way, it's not the end of the world, like we just learned in the last sugya, that the greater of a Talmud Chacham, meaning of a Yireh Shamayim one is, then the more you are allowed either to do ha'arama, or the more you are allowed, because you are very God-fearing, to know that in this case it's okay, and in that case it's not okay. Maybe she made it with a shinoi. However, he felt that he should apply to himself a loy plug, because if he'll get used to eating it when it's made with a shinoi, he might eat it if it was not done with the shinoi. The Rebbe was talking on a higher level. The higher the level, the more things are permitted. Obviously, within halachically. Amar Rabba Bar Shabam, Rabino. I was standing in front of Rabino, and he now stirred this added water in the chardal. That was shalosh of Shabbos in a shinoi, not Yad was the shinoi, not keli was the shinoi, but he took a garlic and he used the garlic to stir it. And that was okay. Because that's also considered the shinoi. Like we mentioned in the intro, that some people, when they make oatmeal, the fact that they don't stir it in a circular motion, they go a shasi ve'erev, that's also called a shinoi. Omar Zutra.
Rabbi.
Yes.
You said that the Rebbe is on the higher level. In this case, the Rebbe's wife is also on the higher level. So the question is, if the Tam is not on that level, why can't he eat it if it was made by the person who was on the higher level?
Never to have any type of chardal mishachs that was water was added on Shabbos, then you can't eat it. That was his chumrah. Doesn't matter who made it. It's not objectively prohibited. It's for him, he doesn't eat it. Let's go back. Omar Mazutra. Lei silchas hakochol hanishmaitze. Elo ki hod itmar chardu shalosh erev Shabbos lamachar memachu bein beyad bein bekeli. B'chlal, there's no problem. There's no issue at all because since it was already needed from before, you're not even violating the Rabbanan. And also, you can add in it dvash. However, here's what you need to happen. Oh, I'm sorry. Adding it is also midrabanan. But the way you do a shinoi is not with the keli that you use. He's giving a simple answer. He says that the definition midoiraisa of kneading is some sort of forceful beating action. When you're doing it bekoyach. So as long as that's yitroif, you're beating it, bekoyach. Ma'arav means you're mixing it gently. As long as you mix it gently, that's already your shinoi. So taki, that's also midrabanan, but don't say use a keli, use a yad. Simply mix it gentler, and that in itself is already gavaldik. We'll take it down from a drabanan into mutaligavlik. Next, shachalayim. In English, that's cress. Sheshachakam out of Shabbos, that was soaked in out of Shabbos. Now, why would they soak that? So here already Rashi tells us, as we'll see behemshech hadvarim, that some people would soak it in order for it then, when it's dissolved, to be consumed for therapeutical purposes. Now, whether this is going to go into the issur of making shchikas hamamanim, or whether this is going to go into the issur of exerting yourself unnecessarily, we'll see soon in the hemshech hadvarim. But he says that this shachalayim, that sheshachakon me'erev Shabbos, that was already soaked from before Shabbos. Elamai, you want to add to it? You can add to it noisem l'toichan. You can add to it shemen and chometz. And umamshich l'toichan, you can put into it amisa zalosh and be mamshich. You ever heard someone asking for a lachaim? Zay mamshich a lachaim. That's you add to it some amisa. We'll see soon what amisa means. And what's the issue here is here that there, it's the shachalayim is dissolved in the water, so it's like mustard seeds that were already needed. But adding more liquid is adding to the kneading. So this is already an issur d'Rabbanan. So the solution is whatever it is that you're adding, do the lo yitroif, as long as you don't beat this additional moisture. Elama'arev, you're only steering it gently. Again, that in itself is a shinoi. It's not a problem. Shum sheriskoy me'erev Shabbos, if garlic was ground up from before Shabbos, l'machar noisim l'toichay pul grisin, you can add to it beans and split beans. Now here again, the garlic, if the garlic would have no natural moisture of its own, if we would look at that chopped up shtiklach garlic as individual grains, then adding liquid to it and mixing it together would be an act of lisha. But we consider it already, there's already moisture. It's already one mass. You're adding is also midrabanan, so no problem. So whatever it is that you add, as long as below yishchoik elama'arev, as long as you don't beat it forcefully, you only stir it gently, that is another shinoi, and then it becomes completely mutter. And now we have to teach what was this addition in the shachalayim. They add amisa. Umamshechas amisa l'toichan mai amisa. So the Gemara says amisa is nana, right? We have this so many times already, right? Mint, ninya. Oh, Rabbi Yeshua, ninya. That mint is good l'tachale for cress. It's good to know. Says the Gemara. Going back to the Mishnah on DAF Kuf Lamed Tesam and Beis. The Mishnah had three shitas, right? We learned the Tanach, we learned the Rabbi Yehuda, and then we had the Rav Zajac regarding the Inoimlin b'Shabbos. And here we'll have clarity. What was the issue, and why are you allowed to make a certain limited amount? So Tanach Rabbanan, before we define what it is and what it was made for, the Braisa already contrasts the Inoimlin with something similar, but halachically not the same. Yes, oisin inoim lim b'Shabbos, like our Tanach, no limits. But the ein oisin aluntis not. So says the Gemara, ve'ezihi anoimlin ve'ezi aluntis. Anoimlin is a mixture of yayin and devash and pilpulin. And again, it was consumed by healthy people. It was also consumed for therapeutic purposes. So here, this might have take us into the issue of making something for therapy, or it might take us into some sort of drink that takes a lot of exertion to make. So there's a tircha involved over here. And nevertheless, again, the Tanach holds that you are allowed to make it, and aluntis that you may not make. B'chlal, that's yayin yoshan. Yayin yoshan is wine in its second year. Umayim salulin and clear water. Ba'afar and balsam, and that was made exclusively to Avdi Lebe Masusa Lamekar, that when people left a bathhouse and their body was overheated, this potion was drunk in order to cool the body off. So in other words, it was only drunk, that's called for therapeutical purposes. So therefore, it goes into the Gezeda of not doing something for therapeutical purposes because people might end up grinding herbs. Amar Rabbi Yosef, right, the wide line. Zimna Chado, I want you to know that at one time, Alice Lebasar Marukva, I went behind Marukva into Levei Bani. Marukva was very wealthy. We know he's very wealthy because he gave tremendous amounts of tzedakah, as the Gemara tells us the story of Mesiras Nefesh v'chulei. But anyways, I went after him. Kinafki, when we walked out, this is like his first experience. He went to the Schwitz over here, the Russian Schwitz on Pico. So Asoi and Ashki on Chamra Chadkasa. Now, the Marshal says it's not Chamra, that's the whole story is about the Saluntis. They gave, now there is some wine in it, it's Yain Yoshan, but they gave to me, to Rabbi Yosef, a cup of this Aluntis, and Vachashi, mi binasa dereshi va'atur for the kari. I felt myself cooling off from the tip of my hair until the end of my foot. In other words, it really worked. It cooled me off. And the ashi on kosachin, if I would have drunk another cup, haba mistafina, I'm afraid that they would already deduct my schusim of the next world. Says Rashi that it brings such a chill on the body. Rashi says that he would have died of cold, and if he would have lived, it would have been a nikoy of a sechuyos. Others say, the Marshal says no, that it was such a pleasure to drink it, that he felt that drinking another cup, he would experience a full time, he would have a shtickle Gan Eden in this world. It would take away from his Gan Eden in the next world. Why did he drink every day more than one cup? So the Gemara answers, Shani Marukva is different. The Dashbe, he became accustomed to it. So since he already had it every time he left the bathhouse, it already was not that effective. That's the challenge when a person indulges in that which you indulge in life, that it doesn't even work anymore. You got habituated to it. You need more. You need more, and say help garnish. Says the Holy Mishnah. Next, get a lot of miscellaneous rulings, which is Gavaldik. Ein shoinen es achiltas bepoishtin. You may not soak chiltis in English, it's called asafetida. I don't know what that means, so we'll stick to the chiltis. You are ein shoinen es achiltas bepoishtin. You cannot soak it in poishtin. Rashi says here, again, people would soak chiltis in lukewarm water. Question for refuah. So again, we're going to see whether the issue is making it a refuah, whether the issue is doing a tircha. However, you can put chiltis into vinegar, and then you can eat your food with that vinegar, being that even healthy people also eat chiltis with vinegar. And as we learned earlier on, that many times when it comes to the isurim of making refuah, there's a madas ayin aspect. If it's not apparent that it's l'refuah, it's okay, as it is over here. Next in the Mishnah, the ein shalom es hakashinim, don't soak vetch in water. Vetch. When you put vetch in water, so a lot of the refuse, a lot of the garbage goes to the top, and the good stays in the bottom. So this is some sort of sorting mechanism. Sorting is also to do on Shabbos. Next, don't rub them. That's boited. And to remove, another way of removing the garbage from the good, you are allowed to put it into some sort of sieve, or into a basket, and you're putting in it for storage, Even though when you put it in it, since the keli is farlechert, some of the garbage will go through the holes. It's like a harama. That's not your kavana, and that's okay. Next in you cannot sift straw through a sifter. Again, sifting. And don't put it on a tall place in order for vishvil sheyeret hamoitz, because the wind will blow, so the shaft will be blown away. Your kavana, don't do it if that's your kavana. But if you want to take straw and you want to take it from where it is and put it into a keli, you know what you can use? You can use a spoon. You can use a kavana. If you want to put it into a trough, then you can use a kavana. When you're taking it in the kavana, until it comes into the avois, some of the impurities will go out. That's already okay, because your main kavana is simply to transport it and not to sift it. Says the Gemara in Elyahu. Going back to the first in the Mishnah. The Mishnah did not clarify. What's the problem with soaking chiltis in lukewarm water? Shara mai. So initially, Tirgama Rav Ada from Narsha in front of Rabbi Yosef. If you do it, you're chayv chatas. Shara chayv chatas. So right away, Amalei Abai Elam Ata. Shara umsa if you soak meat in water. What's the issue? It's garnished. Hachinami de machayiv. There's no issue soaking chiltis. What are you doing? Abaya says the issue is, like we mentioned, that even healthy people had chiltis, which is why you for sure can put it in chaymitz, but it's a certain amount of exertion that was needed to prepare this chiltis drink, and the issue is uvda dechayl. Now, Rabbi Yechanan from Rabbi Yanai, here we see clearly Rabbi Yanai was one of the teachers of Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yanai was greater than Rabbi Yechanan. Now that we established that the Isur is not a Deraisa, the Isur is a Derabanan, what are we learning in these dafim? That when you make a shinoi, if something is also Deraisa, it becomes Derabanan. If something to begin with is only also Derabanan, it becomes Mutter. Now that we established it's an Uvda Dechoil, people that would soak the chiltas for therapeutical purposes would do a dafka in lukewarm water. That's how it would dissolve better. Is doing it b'shinoi okay? Can you do it b'tzoyna? So Rabbi Yanai answers also. To which Rabbi Yechanan says, no. B'madaik in our Mishnah. For our Mishnah says, ein sharon sacheltus b'poishin in lukewarm water. What does that imply? Chabetzoyna in a mutter. So look at this expression. Amalei, so Rabbi Yanai tells Rabbi Yechanan, im kein mali v'loch. If that's the case, then how am I superior to you? But you think I didn't know the Mishnah? I know that when you learned the Mishnah, you made the deal. It looked to you that from the Mishnah, but signing is mutter. That's why you came to me. I know more than you. You know what I know? I know that our Mishnah, you made a good deal. The Mishnah only answers it in lukewarm water. The Mishnah allows you to do it b'sheshinoi. But that's only our Mishnah. And even though it's a stam Mishnah, I know, says Rabbi Yani to Rabbi Yechanan, that Masnis and Yichidohi, it's only Das Yachid, because I know the following Braisa that Rabbi Yechanan did not yet know. Taken the Braisa or Tisefta, ancient and Asachiltis, Leibachamen, Belebitzoinen. No, nothing. Rabbi Yossi is the one that says Bechamen Asud and Bitzoinen is Muteh. In other words, Rabbi Yani says that we have to paskin like the Chachamim, even though it goes against the Stam Mishnah of Rabbeinu HaKodesh. Says the Gemara like, Lamai Avdilai. I know, like we mentioned, since healthy people also consume it, there isn't a shchika samamanim involved, but it's also done litafua. What type of illness does this resolve? So he answered, liyukra delibo. The Gemara answers, it's in order to take away heaviness of heart. What's heaviness of heart? I have no idea. Baruch Hashem. Is it depression? Is it a heart palpitation problem? But whatever that is, if you have chiltis, bapoishin, you're good. Yosef, he had this heaviness of heart. And then he came in front of Marukva, and Marukva tells him, Zilgo, Shesei, to Lasa Tikle Chiltasa, take 3 gold dinner weights of chiltis. A lot, I got to drink a lot of it, and drink it over B'Twasa Yoima. And then we can't you see, when we learn the Gemara, you see from the Gemara that Yukra Deliba is healed by having chiltis. How much? How often to have it, we don't know, which is why many people who would follow these remedies would not get healed, and they would be moitzilas and the chachamim, which is why we can't do it generally. But here we see, he knew the details. This amount, and divide it into 3, and every day drink a potion. And indeed, Azali went. Ishte Chamsha b'Shabbos, he drank the first potion on Thursday, and then he drank the second potion on Mali Shabbos. And now the question is, are you allowed to prepare it for the third day on Shabbos? L'tzafra Azal Shol b'Midrasha, can I have it? Amrulei, Tanan Devei Rabada, or Amrullah Tanan Devei Marbarabada, we learned so in the Baraisa that Shoisa Adam Kavi Kavaim Beina Choishesh, that indeed, even though it's the last day of taking it, then you would think, now that it's the last day, I'm not allowed to do it. We learned in our Mishnah, Ein Shoiden, but he didn't soak it. Ein Shoiden, maybe the question was not whether he can soak it, maybe the question is whether he can take it, taking medication. And you would argue, your antibiotics on the 10th day. That was the question. Can you skip it? So he told him, no, you take it all the way until the end. Amalahu, so to which he countered, Lishtois like a boiling. My question was not whether I can drink it, he clarified now. My question was, I know that I can drink it. Can you make it? Lishtois, and again, what's the issue of Lishtois? Uvda dechol. You have to drink it. Maybe if you didn't do it, you can't do uvda dechol. Drink it Motzei Shabbos. Amalahu, Rab Chiya bar Avin, b'didi hava uvda. It happened, the same thing happened to me. Notice, I forgot to soak it for the last day. And everyone agreed that if you already made it, you could drink it. Drinking it is okay, because the problem is only uvda dechol, because even healthy people have it. But can you make it? So Asoi Shiilti l'Rafuna v'Amar Hachi Amar Rav Shoyre b'Tzoinen u'Maniach b'Chamon. That you can do it with the shinoi, and then you have to have it warm. Let the sun warm it up. Says the Gemara, command the shadi. Is this only according to Rabbi Yossi? That was the whole diuk from the Mishnah. So he says no. Afilu l'manda asar, which is the chachamim of the Baraisa. Hanimili, when is it asar to do it? If you did not begin the therapy, then don't start making it on Shabbos. Since you already began the therapy by taking it chamsha on Thursday and on Friday, if you won't have the last day, then mistaken, which is a rule in remedies. Sometimes if you don't begin taking medication, you're healthier than if you begin and you don't end. Because many medications, they also have some of the illness in you. However the medication works, you got to take it. Once you began, you're mechuyev to finish it. Says the Gemara, the uncle of Rav bar Yosef was walking, leaning on the shoulder of his nephew, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, that was serving his uncle. Amalei, the uncle tells the nephew that came out in a little bit of Safra. When we passed the house of Rab Safra, Ailina, I want to enter. Not you, me. I'm going to enter. I'm going to ask him questions. And indeed, Kimatu, when he got there, Ailei, the nephew helped him go in there. But he was in there by himself. What did he ask of him? Boy, minei, Mao, le kaskuse kitinasa. The Shabbat is one allowed to rub a freshly clean linen shirt on Shabbos. So they would have linen shirts, and rubbing it might be asir or might be mutter. What's the question? Explains the Gemara. Do we say that rubbing these shirts is only lirakuche, right? And it's only to make it softer, and making a garment softer on Shabbos is permitted, or maybe one of the benefits of rubbing these garments is and it makes the garment appear whiter, but it says that so therefore it should be asur. That's what he asked Rav Safra. So Amalei, so Rav Safra told the uncle that we can say that you're rubbing your shirt only to make it softer, and therefore v'shapru dami. Good. Now the uncle leaves. Right? Rav Acha bar Yosef leaves. But now the nephew asked his uncle, my boy Marmine, what did you ask of Rav Safra? So he told him, and he told me, Shapar Dami, you're allowed to do it. So right away the nephew says, Upa, why were you only asking regarding a shirt? Sudara means, again, the kerchief, the shmata that they would make into a turban. They're also, you want it to look clean, you want it to look white, you want it to be soft. Why didn't you ask that? So the uncle says, that I already knew, that it's awesome. So I didn't have to ask that because I already asked it in the past. from Rav Huna. The boyim and Rav Huna, partially, and he told me that it's prohibited. That's what we have in the Meseiras Hashas Leisura. So right away, the nephew tells the uncle, if you already had a psak din that you may not rub a turban, because the person is also doing it to make it look brighter, the tisha lei lamar misudara. Why didn't you already extrapolate and know that the shirt is also asur? So right away, the Rav Achar by Yosef tells his nephew, no, Hassan, when it comes to your hat, ki oilu is ki oilu de chivara. Indeed, people are more particular that their hats should look perfect. Perfect doesn't mean not only comfort, about appearance. So just because he paskin that you may not rub the new linen shmata of your turban, when it comes to a shirt, and indeed, he got the heter. It's just interesting that he didn't want to ask the Shiloh of Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, oh, so he stopped there. And here he chapped up Safra who gave him a heter. Rab Chizda says, Rab Chizda, hi, Kitonisa, this we're speaking about a fresh linen shirt, Daf Kuf Mem on the base. You should know that when you gave something into a koives, to a launderer, he would give you back your shirt on a hanger. But the hangers then were made out of a rod that were later used for fire. In other words, it's a non-keli. It's something that's made for the fireplace. And it's muktzah. So he tells them that if you want to take your shirt off that rod on Shabbos, make sure that you don't remove the hanger from the shirt. You remove the shirt from the hanger. You might be moving muktzah. We already had that's not a problem. You're moving non-muktzah. If that also moves muktzah with it, it's called moving muktzah indirectly. What did we continuously learn? Whether you want to call this kala'ach yad or tiltul min hatzad, not a problem. But kanya mimena, but to remove that stick from the sleeves of the shirt, that is also because that's muktzah. No, don't say that just because the launderers are using that stick as a hanger, like by us, our hanger is not muktzah. It's a keli. It's a keli shmalach lehetim. These rods were shmatas. They were used only once and they were later burnt. It doesn't have a din of a keli. Amarava, that iklei kavoihu, that if the launderer doesn't put in the shmata type of rod, he already paid him $2 to clean a shirt. He already puts in a certain instrument and he wants you to return it to him. But it's a keli that he used when he weaves. That's called a keli shemalachtoi le'isr. What did we learn in the sugya of muktzah at the end? That a keli shemalachtoi le'isr not only can be moved l'tzoyrech gufay, it can even be moved l'tzoyrech mekoymai. Taking the rod out of the sleeves of a shirt is mamish moving it l'tzoyrech mekoymai. You want to put your hands in the sleeves of the shirt. So if what he put the shirt on has a din of a keli, even though it's a clay kivoi, mutter, you can move it because this is a bona fide soyrech mekoyim. That's Rabbi l'shitasai mamash good. That's Rabbi who says that a keli shalach leiser is allowed to be moved even with soyrech mekoyim. If you remember the whole sugya of muktzah, how they were matted it 4 times down. Right, the iser wasn't by the times of Nechania ben Chechlaya very broad. Aside of 3 kelim, everything was asur. And a side of food and svarim. And then they were matted one step after another step, and l'rava, like we just mentioned, kelish l'achtel is mutter to move without a shinoi, even if it is only the tzarech mekaymoi. And ein lochat tzarech mekaymoi more than this. Tzarech mekaymoi, don't think, I need a place on the table, so I'm moving that. No, tzarech mekaymoi means you want to stick your hands in the sleeves of the shirt, and the hanger is in your way. Amar Rab Chizda, Hai kishta diyarko. When you buy a bundle of herbs, even if it's not edible for people, food that's edible for animals, as we'll learn, God willing, in the Mishnah soon, it's also not muktzah. Then but see, herbs get from good to bad. Today we have a refrigeration. We learned so many times they used to bury it in the ground. If on Shabbos you notice that it's already nicht edible, not even for animals, it becomes muktzah. Hi, Taliyah the Bisra. Taliyah the Bisra means they would have strings of meat. These are meats that were not cooked, but they were salted. Like Daniel likes saying, beef jerky, and being that people eat it even without it being cooked. So it's considered food. And it's very healthy. There's a lot of protein. But they cover a string of fish That is salted. Now, it was salted to preserve it. There was a reason for it, but it's not yet edible. This is before they chopped sushi, before all that. That's usher. Again, because if something is not edible, then, and we even learned before that fish is not even edible for animals. Remember the chai is that meat uncooked, unsalted is good for animals. We learned to place this. Fish, guys, we're on lower than animals today that we eat sushi. It's b'chlal not edible, is good. Says the Gemara, the first white line. Amar Afketino. It all goes to eating it all comes from eating whole wheat. That's how it began. We eat whole wheat, bran, Michael Behema, and then from there we digress to eating sushi. Amar Afketino. Guys, we're going mamish midas deracheretz to spice it up a little bit. Going onto a bed of a married couple, you're not allowed to go there. Standing on there is ki'ilu oimed b'kreisa shalisha. It's like you're standing on a woman's stomach. Why? Rashi says the maharer. All this important we have of the Rebbe's father that he never slept in a bed in a hotel. I just heard from Mrs. Miriam Swerdlov, Gavaldik. She was saying stories how when Rabbi came to her uncle, I think's house, how they were machnas oirach, so they didn't have enough pillows and blankets, so they went to a fancy launderer and they rented very beautiful pillows and blankets. When Rabbi went in there, he took a look at the pillow. He knew that this household cannot afford Zajac fancy pillows. He says, "Is this from a Yid?" So she said, "No." So Rabbi Levi said, "Ich will mein Kopf of ihr Kischen nit legen." My head is not going on that pillow. That's the Gemara over here. However, Belav Milsehi means it's a chumrah. It's the avoid of tzaddikim. Al pi halacha, you're allowed to go there. Next, Bar Beirav, a young Talmud Chacham. The Zaven Yark, if you're buying vegetables, Liz ben Aricha, buy vegetables that are longer, not the shorter ones. Why? Because when you paid for those vegetables, they didn't weigh them. They sold them based on the width of the bundle. So the width of the bundle was the same whether they are longer or whether they are shorter, right? The third line, kisha, kikisha. The bundle is the same. And b'meila, v'urcha b'meila. If they're going to be longer, you're going to get a little bit more. It's amazing the way Hashem made the world, that the effort is the same. And parnasa, same effort. Some people make a bigger amount of parnasa is because they're selling a higher valuable article. That's the word, that kisha, kikisha. V'urcha b'meila. Something similar. Bar Beirav, the Zaven Kanya, if you're buying reeds, they're also. Reeds were not sold by weight, they were sold by the thickness of the bundle. So make sure that the reeds are longer. Liz ben Aricha, buy the longer reeds. Tuna, kituna, that's the lashon of a bundle when it comes to reeds. Just to be aware of this phenomenon in the world, that sometimes you make the same effort and the results are much greater. So be mindful of that. And then don't waste your efforts. Put your efforts in that which gives you greater profit, right?
What about Lefum Tzara Agra?
Not over here. That's very good. So Tzemach is saying Lefum Tzara Agra L'chura means Beruchnius. Beruchnius, we never have this. The Gashmius, it works this way, and we all know that. It's mamish, the same effort. Same effort. You sold a house worth $1 million, and you got your points, your 2 points, and you sold a building worth $50 million. Same effort, but the article was more valuable. If you don't have a lot of bread, nebach yet, don't eat vegetables. You know why? Because vegetables or herbs, they whet the appetite. It doesn't mean all types of vegetables. Rashi gives examples. There are certain herbs that they make you hungrier. So if you don't have bread, be careful, don't have those vegetables. You should know, I never ate these herbs, not when I was poor. I didn't eat vegetables when I was wealthy. Miman of shach, don't eat vegetables. Gavaldik. When I was poor, because I'll eat the vegetables. The real food is bread. I didn't have money for bread. When I was wealthy, why would I eat vegetables? The Amina, I always said, if I have place in my stomach for the vegetable, why should I put a vegetable? Let me put meat and fish. Same concept. In other words, there's enough space for food. Put in that which is healthier, that which is wealthier. If he doesn't have a lot of bread, Rashi says Gavaldik, Don't nash and nibble the whole day. A little piece, a little piece. When you nash the whole day, you end up eating a lot more food because you never feel satisfied. If you're not wealthy yet and you can't afford to nash the whole day, the way Baruch Hashem we could, wait until you're hungry, eat until, like the Rambam says, you're almost satisfied, and you're going to stay satisfied for much longer. Versus eating a little bit and eating a little bit. That's behemoths do that. That's the way they're training us. We eat that 50 meals a day. They ate 2 meals a day then. And that's it. If you don't have enough bread, don't be the one that breaks bread by hamoitzi. This goes back to a sugi and brachas, that when you break bread, you have to share from your bread to everyone who heard the bracha from you. And you have to give people ba'ayin yafa. And if you're poor, my Talmud oven ba'ayin yafa. Better not to be the leader. If you can't give it, either do it ba'ayin yafa or don't do it at all. I never broke bread when I was poor. I didn't break bread. This is when I was poor. Until I reached the point that when I would check the food that I had before the meal, I realized that I have all of my needs before, and therefore then, and I knew that I can give colts, I can give it ba'ayin yafa. Colt sarki means also giving it ba'ayin yafa. Only then would I be the one who breaks the bread. If a person is able to eat bread of lesser quality, like we mentioned, barley bread is of lesser quality, and he goes ahead and he eats bread of greater quality, he's over on maltashris. Guys, don't forget that Papa made beer. If you can get away with drinking beer and you drink wine, which is more expensive, over on maltashris. Says the Gemara, you know why? Maltashris the gufa adiv. That God made the world in a way that even when a person is poor, Hashem makes substitutions of that which is a lot more affordable, that's just as good as. If you can't afford oil, so you would smear themselves with oil a lot, and you have a pit. When water sits in a pit for a long time, what goes in there? We call it fungus, it becomes green, right? That's good. That's like oil. If you don't have oil, use that. The Eibishter made for you for free, right? This substitute. Again, a bar b'dav means young. It means you're not wealthy yet. The zavin unsa, when you're buying meat, you can't afford all different types of meats. So he gives them an answer. God is kind that Lisbon let you buy the neck of the animal, because there is beit wasam in it. So all 3 types of meats, which is fatty meat, which is lean meat, which is that type of meat. All of it is found in the neck. Again, it's a substitution for all these types. It's more affordable, but the Eibishter, with his kindness, gave options for people who are not yet wealthy to be able to have all of the benefits of those who think that they are wealthy. When you are buying these linen garments, so Rav Chizda is saying that even when you're poor, buy more expensive garments. You know why? They're going to last longer. And not only will they last longer, so in the long run, you're going to end up paying less money, but it's important to wear dignified garments. Lisbon, buy dafka midahar abba. Buy the garments from this place called Nahar Abba. They had the more expensive garments, shirts. And hold the eye, you're not that wealthy, so take care of it properly, which is that the nichavra, whiten it only once in 30 days. Don't overly send your stuff to the dry cleaners. That's mamish today. Today you can buy a suit for $4,000, and they can convince you got away you get a discount. After twice in the dry cleaners, you have no suit left. So garnish, it glance, it's a mirror. She says because the mafatya, then if you only wash it once in 30 days, it's going to last for 12 months, which was a big yichus then. And the point is, to take care of your garments properly, first of all, you're going to end up economizing if you buy something more expensive. And Rav Chizda says an Aman Arif, as we see clearly, Rav Chizda was poorer when he was younger. It works, and it's important. And so, but who needs buy something less affordable? My kitunisa. Why is it called kitunisa? Because it's a composite of the words kitana. Kata means that it brings fine chavedim. That's the way the world is. What did we learn above? That Rabbi Yochanan called his garments mechabdusa, right? Well, they give you covet. You're going to wear nicer garments. You're going to attract a more refined group of chavedim. So it's important.
I'm trying to get the criteria of Rav Chizda. Like, there's Barbarav and then there's Ayman, like everyone. What is the criteria?
I think Bar Beirav, what I understand is that they're poor. Bar Beirav means a yeshiva bachir. Yeshiva bachir is not someone that's wealthy. But Shlomo is making a point. Certain things are only for Bar Beirav and certain things is for the general public, and we have to look into it. Why? Okay. Bar Beirav. Don't sit with your garments on a new hemp mat. In other words, he's telling you to buy expensive clothing. It's worth it. It's going to last. If you're sitting on something that's rough, the machal yaman, it's going to ruin your garments. Now here, Shlomo, I can tell you, a Bar Beirav, a yeshiva bacher in Yiddish, a kvetcht a bank. So you got to make sure that the bench is made out of a material that's not going to ruin your pants. Hayman, you're not sitting and learning 20 hours a day. You can sit on a mat for 10 minutes, a few minutes that we learn, and it's not going to rub out your pants. Don't give your garment to a hostess or to a launderer that she should clean it to you. If she's your hostess, you know why? Because the lavur it's not that a cheretz. There might be some zera in your garment, and she's going to all disrespect you. And that's like a Bar Beirav. You have to keep the covenant later. So don't give your garments to someone that is your hostess if they might find something there that's not appropriate. Now we're moving on to the eights that Rabbi Chizda gave to his daughters. That the hevetz and the yasan ba'api guvraychu, you should always behave with modesty in front of your husbands. Meaning, he gives examples. Don't eat bread in the presence of your husband. Because eating bread, right, that's having a proper meal. The husband might look and see that you're glutinous. Another din, don't eat vegetables at night or herbs at night because they bring about bad breath. This is before they had Listerine. Another eight satayva was don't eat dates at night. Likewise, don't drink beer at night. They cause bloatedness. Then there's the venting of air. Another eight satayva was don't relieve yourselves in the same place that your husbands relieve yourselves. Right? It's all about them maintaining a certain amount of tznius, which will add to the mystery and to the kavod and to the desire that their husbands will have for them. If someone is knocking on your door, when you answer someone's ringing of the bell, don't say, see, in English, who is there is masculine and feminine. It's the same. In Aramish, there is the masculine and the feminine. So only don't say manu, who is it in the masculine. Only say who is it in the feminine. So they should not, in other words, they should not feel that you're interacting with every man over here. And no, you're interacting with women. And the final answer was that Nikit Margonisa B'chadayadi, hold a pearl in one of your hands, and Vikura and a kilin in the other hand. Margonisa Achvi, show your husbands the pearl, but Vikura le'achvalu, but the kilin don't show to them. Only until when they are in pain, and then V'hadar Achvali, and then show them the kilin. Let's just read it inside Rashi, 13 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Nokid Margonisa B'chadayadi, Vikura B'chadayadi, Zok Rashi, that Keshabaylech, Mimashmesh Beich, Lisavachlech, Litashmesh. And the husband is voiches hadodin biyodi achas v'acheres adayis amakoim. So says Rab Chizda v'aytenashi margonisa achvalei hadodin im siiloi. Why? Shetisraba tavosoi. But initially umakim tashmish altam siiloi maher. Kidei sheyisraba tavosoi v'chibosoi v'yitzta'ir and v'hader achvilei. That was the final advice he gave his daughters. Let's go back and think about it. Ein shoganas akashinim. Right, so we learned at the end that to move straw into a trough and you're using a sifter as the keli of moving it, that's okay. You know what this is today, my friends? If you have shalom, to give you an example, and you want to take it out of the bowl, so if the spoon that you have is a spoon with holes, it's not the end of the world. Because if your kavanah is to sift, that might be more problematic. If your kavanah is to take food from here to there, even if the keli allows for something to get out, so we learned in the Mishnah, it's not a problem. Says the Gemara, yeah, it's not a problem. That's only our Mishnah. Masnisan deloike haitano. The Tanya Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, "Ein mashgichin the kavara." We never lose a mashgichin. We never lose a kavara. We never use a kavara because even though that's not your kavanah, it de facto it does sift. Now, I want you to know that we don't paskin like this, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And one thing is clear by Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that when we say that he's kavanaki. Kav means normally we paskin like him. Here also, Kav, we said this many years ago, Kav, Kuvav, that in Mishnayis, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is brought 106 times. So it's a play of words. It's not just that there is relatively, he's not quoted that much. That's the pshat. He's only quoted a little bit, but it's good. Good means we paskin like him. In the Mishnah, we paskin like him. Here, it's a braisa. Rabbeinu HaKadosh didn't even write a shita. How can we don't paskin like him? And you are allowed to use a kavara to move straw from one location to the other, even though some of the shaft, some of the klipa, some of that, the impurities will get expelled, says the Holy Mishnah. Now we're going to muksa foods. They used to feed oxes a lot of food, and these oxes or these cows were basically, almost stuck in a location to get them fattened. And here, if there would be too much impurities, if there would be too much food in front of them, then there was a potential for those extra foods to get soiled and no longer edible for the animals. So the Mishnah says you are allowed to sweep out those foods. There's a chiddush here that those foods are not yet viewed as inedible. They're not yet muksa. Sweeping, we know sweeping on the ground is asa because you might be mashva gumais, and that is connected either to binyan or to chayrish. However, as we'll see in the Gemara, these foods were not on the floor that's made out of earth, but it was in a keli, it was in a trough. And just like we paskin today, you can sweep a floor because you're not going to be mashva gumais. Sweeping a trough is mutter. Another din in the Mishnah, if there's again a lot of food in front of these animals, you don't want for them to put excrement in the foods. It might happen. If it happens, the food will become inedible. So you are allowed to be misalik it. Two dinim. These are the words of Rabdoisa. The Chachamim say asur. Now, what is the issue? And are the Chachamim arguing only with the first case or the second case or with both? We'll see in the Gemara. Next in the Mishnah. You are allowed to take food from one animal and put it in front of another animal. We don't say that once one animal type ate from this straw, another animal will not eat from it, because if that were to happen, then the food becomes muktzah. We don't say that. Again, more details in the Gemara. So let's begin. Says the Gemara, the Chachamim in our Mishnah, only Aresha Pliga. You can't sweep. Maybe it's usher to sweep. Or they only argued on the Seifa because maybe the food is already dirtied, maybe it's muktzah. Or do they argue on both? So Tashema, the Tanya, that they indeed argue in both cases. Now let's clarify more what the issues are. And the issues only be evil shel karka. No, the food was on the ground. And indeed, now we understand the reason why you may not sweep it out like Chachamim is you can't sweep. Will be evil shel keli, but if you have a trough that's not made out of earth, it's made out of a material that doesn't have chaditzin, and you won't be mashva gumais, then everyone agrees that it's mutter. And right away the Gemara says it can't be. Now, true, it's not a certainty, right? That's the whole issue. So it might be a davar she'ein mischavin, might be psikresha, but we're not getting in there. So L and D, the Gemara retracts. Only be evil shel keli. And the reason why the Chachamim asked is because loy plug, aval be'ivul shel karka, divrei hakol is going to be asur. Beautiful. Okay, so in other words, the issue on that issue was, we don't say, like we paskin, we are allowed to sweep our floors right now, even though we're not allowed to sweep earthen floors. By earthen floors is an issue, mashva gumais, not on a keli. And the issue of misalk and litzadadim is that we don't say that the food that you are removing is already excremented. It's already inedible. We don't say that. We can still assume that the food is good. It's not muksa, and therefore you can move it. Now, Now, that's not a rule across the board. In certain animals, after they eat, no other animal will touch that food. And when that happens, the food is muktzah. So the Gemara clarifies, we limit it. Tanach, we learned in one brayso, you can take food from an animal who has a fine mouth, and you can put it in front of an animal that has piyara. Not the other way around. That makes more sense. You know, which animal is that? We'll see in a moment. But the point is that if you take it from an animal that has piyara, that animal will ruin the food. The other animal won't eat it. Hold on. We learned in another brayso the opposite words. No one is arguing, but the words are the opposite. That we do take food from in front of an animal shapiyara and yafa. And Omar Abaye explaining these two tanoim, no machlokes tanoim. Either these are the animal types. Food that was sitting in front of donkeys. We are allowed to take it away from the donkeys on Shabbos and put it in front of a toir, and put it in front of an ox or a cow. Cows will eat the shirayim of a donkey. And the opposite is what we cannot do. Taking it from an ox in front of a donkey, a donkey will not eat the shirayim of an ox, and therefore it's muktzah. Let's go analyze the wording of each vice. What does that mean? Which animal is piyah yafa? That's a chamoid. Why is a chamoid an animal that piyah yafa? The animal does not drool. That's the first brayso. We are allowed to put it in front of an animal that has a bad mouth, means a para, daf kuf mem aleph, because when a cow or when an ox eats, they drool into the food. Very good. Now, by the way, from one ox to another ox is mutter, because it's the drool of the same animal type. But if the donkeys would have drooled into the food, the oxen would not have touched it. When it says in the second brayso, the second brayso calls a donkey an animal that has a bad mouth. You know why? Not because it drools. It means chamoir. You know, this brayso calls it a piyara because it does not discriminate. A donkey eats even thorns, even dirt, but it doesn't drool. So the donkey is called an animal, and you can put it in front of an animal, shapiyah yafa, which is a para. A para is the daik of achla. Because what counts, what will make one animal not eat from another animal is if the first one that already partook, whether they drooled into it. And as long as there isn't drool, moisture, lachluchi is from another animal type, then you will consume. So bottom line is, you can take animals from a donkey on Shabbos and put it in front of an ox. The ox will eat it. You cannot take animals from an ox and put it in front of a donkey. And just to say one word about lachluchi is that even though the chamoir is still a chamoir, and the loy doyeg v'achel means that it does not discriminate, the chamoir still eats donkeys. But we know that we were benched, Yisachar chamoir gorem. And what's the maila, at least of a donkey? At least ep is the rear, the drooling over gashmius he doesn't have anymore. So when he eats, he's not drooling over it, which is mamash ekeldik. But the ox, before you learn the Torah, right, stama ox, that already has rear, and that's something that makes whatever is in front of you completely not edible. God willing to be continued. Kandashan was good. Good morning.
It's good kedushin.
So what are we? We're the oxen or we're the donkeys?
We're the donkeys. Halalai. If we are a donkey, even though we're still fagirot, we're a donkey. But at least, hopefully, if you learn enough Torah, we're not drooling over Elamaz anymore. And that in itself makes it disgusting. Even an ox wouldn't eat from it. Don't drool. Drool is too much taiva. Time is a taiva.
Okay.
I wouldn't.
Thank you.